What's with the army jacket? You
Every single one of you that is tuned into the podcast, you could hear the man of the hour. He's talking to me and asking me questions right now. And I tell you, from the moment that we hopped on the phone this morning and then got on video, it's like I've known this guy for my whole life. I've been doing studying on him. He is incredible. He says in his bio that he's the grandfather of legal marketing, but I'm saying I'm calling the shot today. This is the godfather of legal marketing. He was one of the first. We're gonna get down because we're gonna fact check all this stuff. He is the man. But in 1978 and 79, he was way ahead of the curve doing legal marketing on TV, like doing commercials on TV before anybody was doing it. I mean, this guy is going to help us to understand that it's not the new school, it's not the shiny, it's not the thing that is the newest trend, that it is the old school, it is the principle based, and is all about truth telling as much as possible. He just became one of my new friends for life, and I was asking him about this. Was there anything off limits? And he was like, I like to keep it classy. I like to keep it truthful. And as long as that is, then he's going to bring his old school flair, which is going to be amazing. I'm coining him, not the grandfather of legal marketing. With 46 years of experience in his craft, being a master of his craft, I'm going to say that he's the godfather of legal marketing, and he's going to give us an offer that we cannot refuse. So let's get this party
started. Do I have to trademark that? Do I have to
Nothing more on my mind. I got two shines, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised. Over and over and over again. Make no mistake, we continue to win. Defeat never known, cause I will not lose. They wanna mimic my moves, but can't walk in my shoes.
The one, the only, Mr. Harlan Schillinger. Don't call me Schillinger, the godfather of legal marketing. Welcome to the show, my man.
Hey, Kelly, that was awesome. What a great introduction. And I'll tell you, that video that I just saw, where was that taken?
So that is the Vibe Room. It's a live version of the podcast. So many people wanted to meet the icons like you, and they wanted to sit in the studio with me. So we created a live experience called the Vibe Room, where the people get a chance to see you up close and personal, and I get to interview you in front of the whole entire audience. And then we have a musical act that brings us in and brings us out too.
Awesome. So you are the real deal. I love it.
You're the real deal. 46 years in your profession. Number one, I don't care what profession it was. 46 years is so incredible. When you're so far ahead of the curve, Harlan, like you were in 1978, 79, when you were doing commercials on TV for legal marketing, how do you continue to push forward when no one even understands what you're doing at the time?
Well, first of all, I got into the business in 1974, 1975. And I was blessed with a tremendous mentor, a gentleman named Bill Meiskens. He was the executive creative director of Ola Thompson, William Esty, and I forget the other one at the moment. He got me on the spot. But he was one of the creators. He was the original Mad Men. And, they did the show and all. So when my career began, I was riding in a car with him on Monday and coming back Thursday. And after 3 weeks, he said, hey, kid, you want me to teach you television? And I said, yeah, sure. I finished school in 74, 73. And, I was struggling through my first job in life. And it sounded pretty attractive. But what Bill brought to me is an education. And when you talk about old school, you can't go away from old school advertising, because there's a path that you take and you learn certain things. And the number one thing in advertising that he taught me is you get what you ask for. Mm. And so we created this company It was Madison, Meiskens, and Jones, and we created this company of syndicating high-end television commercials. We were doing the De Beers commercials, and Noxzema, take it off, take it all off. And Bill came up with the idea of taking a very high-end retailer, like a jewelry store, like there's always a Tiffany in every town, and doing a syndicated group of commercials so that we re-added a portion of it. So to jump over to 1977, we noticed that there was a Supreme Court ruling that lawyers could advertise. We said, this could be big. So we took a flyer. We didn't have a client. We created a series of television commercials, and I recently looked at them with the exception of the wardrobe and the fact that it was shot on 16 millimeter. I could use those commercials today because they had strong principle. So we shot this series of commercials. There's 5 partners. We divide up the country, and we went out and sold them. And we all came back, and at that time we had, we had quite a few clients. None of these people were on television. They didn't start using the commercials until I think it was 1980. Sam Bernstein was one of my very first clients in Michigan. I can go down the line of all these pioneers, that went on television and took a risk. They were the black sheep of the world. And that's how it kind of began. And for 15 years, we really didn't have much competition. We didn't have any competition. And most of all, these guys on television didn't have competition. So they raked it in. The biggest problem they had, Kelly, was they didn't know what to do with all the business. So I got involved at that point with, okay, we got all these clients. Now what do we do? So from the very beginning, I was able to fashion a path for these lawyers to grow, whether it's the processes, how do you process the cases? How do you answer the telephone? All of these were real problems. And so I just got immersed in them and learned the business from the inside out of, I wouldn't call it desperation, but it was, I'll call it necessity. So that's the short version.
Well, and we got time, so we get the long version too. How can a person get prepared for the onslaught? Because these things happen. We see these things happen a lot where a person will, in today's vernacular, it'll be this person blew up or their practice blew up, but they didn't know what to do with it. And then that causes more harm than good. Am I correct? So how can a person be prepared?
The modern term is problems with growth, growing pains. When this hit, it was like a bomb. I'm just telling you, it was ridiculous. We couldn't even answer the telephone, and so you did the best that you could.
Who was the first person, Harlan, that said yes? Because when you're going to sell something, you're actually solving a problem that people didn't know that they had, right? So in 1978, 79, it's not like people were like, oh, I've got this challenge of, being on TV. How were you? Talk to us about some of those first conversations.
2 years earlier, before the law was changed, Len Jacoby went on television. Jacoby and Myers.
Oh, yeah.
You're in Carlsbad. And Len really was the pioneer. Now, I started a group with my associates at National Trial Lawyers, the National Trial Lawyers Advertising Hall of Fame, and he was my very first inductee. And I had him do a video to tell the in-depth story of how it all began and how it really started and where it went even before 1977. But Len Jacoby really was the true pioneer. He risked everything, by going ahead on this, and it turned out pretty well for them. And we all followed. So that really, the second lawyer to ever advertise on television was a gentleman named Norton Fricke. Norton Fricke became my associate in Denver when I merged my business with him, my first agency, in 1984. And we built Network Affiliates, which was considered, the gold standard of agencies at the time, and still is the most successful agency in the business. I retired from them from the agency in 2016. And again, that's, part of the story.
So when you talked about old school earlier, and that old school still works, and when we look at, you could interchange the word principles and old school, and principles work, but most of the time people just look at what are the circumstances, and then they react to the circumstances, where you have done it completely different, where you said, I've got this set of principles, let's call them old school, and I'm going to stick to those principles. How can they relate today when television isn't what it used to be, and the onslaught of streaming, things like that?
What a great question. I really love the question because it has so much depth to follow through on. But let me be very, very clear on something. Old school works. What is old school? Is it outdated? Is it worn out? Is it something from the past that doesn't apply today? No. Old school means that it has such strong traction then, now, and in the future. My old school taste, my strategy, and I figured this out very, very early on, because keep in mind, you get what you ask for in advertising, right? Think about that. The other number two thing that I was taught is figure out how people are consuming information and give them more of it. Just this morning, Kelly, I looked at an email, and it was 15 of the craziest ad commercials in the lawyer profession. I looked through every single one of these this morning, and it is amazing. I mean, they're all clowns on television, and it works. But think about what they're getting. But my principle that I created, I didn't create it, I latched onto it, is I talk to the public the way I would a jury. Now, what does that mean? Now, maybe that sounds a little boring to a new generation, to a generation that's moving real fast. But what has not changed is the jury system. The American jury system is the finest jury system in the world because it truly is a democracy, and you're judged by your peers. So when I talk about my concept of talking to the public the way you would a jury is, number one, when you ask something from the jury, you're asking for $5 million, not $5. You have to tell a story. You have to have credibility. You have to have likability. And so what you're doing is you're convincing the members of the jury, 12 people or a 6-person jury, of the facts. You're putting in the emotion, because that took place and how it affected you. And you get what you ask for. Think about that. When you get off the phone, with me today, when you get off this podcast, just think about that. But the most important thing, if you really want to understand the concept, is go see a great trial lawyer in a trial. Now, how does that relate to advertising? The public is the jury. You get what you ask for. If you're in a wreck and you want a check, what kind of a case you're going to get? You're going to get a lot of small cases. And my friend Glenn Lerner is a multimillionaire because of it. But it's small cases, and you have to have a lot of them. We'll get into where the world has shifted on volume versus quality in a minute, when we get into the next segment.
Yeah.
But that principle, and what's crazy is that I haven't found many people that have followed my idea, because everybody's trying to out-gimmick everybody.
I'm writing notes because I get to keep this, and I get to keep this forever. But for anyone out there listening and watching, you guys have all supported for years and years, and I appreciate you, you seldom see me pull out my notebook and write down. But Harlan, you are dropping absolute bombs. Tell me more about I've never heard of advertising being thought about from the perspective of that it's a jury of your peers.
Well, what are you doing when you're in a jury trial? You're selling the jury. Is that any different than selling the public, or selling coats or soap or diamonds or legal services? What are you doing? In a jury trial, you're a salesman. and you're just selling. And everybody has their own way of going about it. But if you look at the true pioneers, the true trial lawyers, I made a statement. I made a very bold statement a couple of years ago, and I've stuck to it, that 90% of the lawyers out there suck. Well, that's not a very polite thing to say, but it is true in my mind. And I will dare anybody to challenge me, and I'll give you a great explanation. Well, what do I mean by that? Before I get into that answer, a very dear friend of mine, Tammy Kay, who runs now and owns Network Affiliates, was asked, and what a brilliant question. How do you get good cases? Well, everybody wants good cases because you're looking at the value of the case. A trucking case, a medical whatever, a wrongful death case. But how do you get those cases? And her answer really resonated. Be a good lawyer. And when I say 90% of the lawyers out there suck, it's because they sell their clients short. They're looking for volume. There's no compassion. I can go on and on and on. And I find it interesting. Okay, maybe it's 89%, but 90, I'll stick to 90. And that's a pretty bold statement. And I'm looking down at an audience. My dear friend Michael Mogul had me introduce him and Arthur Blank at his conference in Atlanta 2 years ago. It was 5,000 lawyers in the audience. It was intimidating. And that's how I started my speech off. And there's a guy in the front row squiggling, I'm not that guy. And I happen to know his reputation. It's all volume. I happen to have looked, after the event, looked at his reviews and such. Oh, I'm not that guy. Bullshit. You are that guy. Because you don't give a shit about your client. What you do is you give a shit about your own pocketbook. You say you appreciate your client, but you really don't. And your actions prove it. And you sell your client short. And that's a very arrogant and bold statement I just made, but I challenge anybody that wants to discuss it with me.
So Harlan, help me with this, because I was telling you about my brother. So my brother is an attorney in Las Vegas, has a phenomenal practice in personal injury. He doesn't do any advertising, but when you say the 90%, I'm saying it because not just because he's my brother, but he's the 10%, right? I believe he's in the 10%, if not the 5.
Your brother does advertise.
Okay, and he does. So talk to me about this, because there's been times where like he said, I see the billboards, I see the stuff, I see all the things, and I've considered it, but he gets such a phenomenal return from the people who have experienced him.
Now, why isn't that advertising?
That is advertising, now that you say it.
Let me tell you what he's doing. What he's doing, he has a strategic plan on how to get business. And what he's doing is he's paying attention. First of all, when I work with a client, and I challenge lawyers all the time, tell me when the last time you read the oath of office that you took to become a lawyer. Now, that oath of office is the first contract a lawyer signs. I have never met one lawyer in my life, I know thousands, that ever read it after they signed it. Now, your brother is conducting himself as that oath says he should. Now, he's conscious about how he treats his clients. He's conscious about how he communicates with them. He's conscious about how he manages that case. That's a strategic plan. He didn't wake up one morning and said, I think I'm going to just do this. First of all, he has that DNA to do it. Most of all, he has a strategic plan. It may be a little unconscious. And he may not have written, I'm going to call Joe Blowback 16 times and make sure he's happy. Make sure I'm covering my bases. I'm going to put more effort into this case than any other case because this client deserves it. I'm going to, on contingency, spend my money for experts. I'm not going to call the insurance company and say, well, hey, what's this case worth? What do you think it's worth? Which majority of lawyers, that's how they do it. And so he does advertise. He does it in a different way. My friend and client, Mark O'Mara in Florida, You remember him, he handled the Zimmerman case. He's on CNN consistently. That's advertising. He chooses to position himself in a much different way. He's an expert. Mark Garagos, friend and client in Los Angeles. He does press conferences. He has high-profile clients. He's in front of the press. He never dodges questions. Believe me, that's advertising. Now, those guys don't label it, this is my advertising plan. But I happen to know for a fact, because I'm close to them, this is advertising. Everybody has their own style. I mean, you have your own style, Kelly. You know, you got that hat going, you got that great hair. You know, I wish I had that beard. But this is your look. But this is your brand.
Yeah.
So everyone advertises, some better than others.
So let me give you a specific. One of my buddies, he's in your profession too. His name is Nate, Nathaniel Hannaford. He works in a town of about 35,000, right? So he does wills and trusts. The guy is unbelievable. His heart is phenomenal. He's the best at what he does. How can, if you were working with him or you were talking with him, what would be the best way in a smaller town to be able to capture either more market share or more of the type of work that you would want to do?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I'd get to know him and I'd get to know his personality, because what you really have to sell is him, right? I mean, are you selling wills and trusts, or are you selling the guy that's doing the wills and trusts? So building credibility around him and his profession for all the right reasons is probably the path I would go first. And then the question is, how do you get that message out? And there's various ways. Not knowing the client, not meeting the client. I don't want to go too far into the conversation because I'm then assuming, which I hate to do in advertising. When you assume, you're usually wrong. I assumed there was a lot of people in the room. I assume I was dealing with all women. You're always wrong on it. Don't assume. But understand who you're selling and what you're selling. Are you selling the trust in this man, or the fact that he knows how to do a will and an estate? Think about that. And so then you have the decision, how am I going to couch him? You know, social media obviously is probably the strongest opportunity this gentleman has. A billboard wouldn't hurt. But you got to get the public to know who you are and trust you. That's building your brand. Your brand is what people think of you when you're out of the room.
Is there a way to be able to have, like, people always say that you can't have your cake and eat it too. I don't believe that. I just believe that you just got to choose the cake. You got to be willing to make it and you got to sit down and eat it. But in this part, can you have your heart, right, and in the right place, and can you still be TOMA, or top of mind advertising? Can you still have that also, but still keep the heart? Because I noticed that sometimes when a brand starts to do billboards, TV, and they're everywhere, the brand itself suffers a bit. Have you seen it happen on both sides?
Because the lawyer prostitutes themselves for the money, and I don't think they have to do that. You know, it's kind of interesting. When you decide to go to law school, and you don't generally go to law school and say, I'm going to make all this money, and the only reason I'm going to law school is for money. You know, you always have this passion for the law and, you know, and people and blah, blah, blah. And it all is very valid. But if you take a look at icons in the world, take a look at real people that we follow, whether it be a Mark Twain or, you know, I hate to bring up, you know, politics, you know, Elon Musk, or, you know, however you want to breathe, it goes into that 90-10 rule. Take a look at some of these fantastic lawyers. Take a look at John Romano, one of the finest lawyers in America. He's practiced 50 years. He's never given up his compassion. He's never given up his personality. He's improved on it. He's made himself more open. And so if you look at look at football players. Look at look at any icons in the business. The bigger guys, hell, you always have access to, and the smaller guys, their ego, has this wall around them. And so I would challenge anybody. You don't have to give anything up. In fact, double down on it. But getting back to my comment about talking to the public the way you would a jury, if you try to pull that shit on a jury and you're not real, you are fucked.
So Harlan, let's take it back. I want to rewind a little bit. We're going to do it kind of like Pulp
Does
Fiction.
that make sense? What I just said?
It does. It does. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I've got my notes right here, and I'm writing as you're going. And I want you to go back and watch some of the episodes because I don't do that. Like, but Harlan, the things that you're speaking on, and they really, when I look at it, this transcends business. Am I correct?
Yeah, it's absolutely. I'll tell you there's no question about it. People want to do business with people they like, people and they trust. And you got to make it as easy as possible to do business. Now, everything I've said is old school. Common sense. It's old school and it's not going to change. People will, look, there's never been more consultants in the business. I see the one guy, that's advertising. I'm the king of this, the blah, blah, blah. Well, there's a backstory to it. He practiced 9 years, 5 years in personal injury, went into a firm, had a partnership, didn't show up for work, or was more interested in coaching other people than building his practice, thrown out of the practice, and now he's teaching people how to build a business. That's pretty. I mean, I can go down the list of all this, what's going on in the world. Yeah. So it's a money grab. But I will tell you that quality sells, credibility sells. You opened up with, I'm writing my notes. I take notes. I did homework on this guy. If you didn't do that, what kind of podcast would you have? Seriously.
Yeah. Not a good one.
Well, so you fall into the 10%.
Thank you.
You do, because you did your work, right? Because you care about pulling this off with me, however you want to couch it.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to, I relate everything back to talking to the jury, because you just cannot bullshit the jury.
Take me back to when there was the first two. You said I can't remember his name. The first guy. Who was the first guy? Was it Jacoby? It was Jacoby. And it's crazy that you say that because I remember those commercials. I remember them like it was yesterday. Jacoby and Myers, and it's in my head. Like I know that's a law firm. I had never used them, but I know it's top of mind. Tell me about the first little break, right? Because in old school, when we're talking about principle-based, it's not this, oh, wow, Harlan jumped onto the scene. No, he stepped onto the scene 46 years ago and has continued to step. What was the first little step that you started to gain a little bit of traction?
Well, when we produced this series of commercials, people thought we were crazy. We just did it on our own. We paid for them. We went out and peddled them. I walked into a lawyer's office and said, listen, I want to share something with you. And I think at that moment on the legal scene, I was looking at this, and about a year after we launched all of that, I said, wait a minute, this is going to be big. This is going to be big. And I wound up, when I merged my business with Norton, I wound up spearheading our legal group, and didn't get involved in a lot of other things in the agency because this was so big, and we made it big. Lawyers, I think, are the second or third biggest advertisers on television, behind pharmaceutical and automotive. They are huge advertisers, good, bad, or indifferent. It's a huge category. Millions of dollars are being spent every single day, multi-million dollars. If you take a look at, the National Trial Lawyers, we do, and I started this with National Trial Lawyers um, you know, the, the top 100, uh, law firms. We also, by the way, started the National Trial Lawyers Advertising Hall of Fame, along with the Golden Gavel Awards. It's kind of like this, the Emmys of, or the Grammys of, of illegal ads. We give out trophies, and was received by the public, and what have you. But kind of forgot where I'm headed on this thing, because I got tied up in the weeds here.
Oh, it was the little break, like the first little break that.
My biggest break was, just recognizing it. I tell you, my career really started to take off when I merged my business with Norton Fricke, because I had to figure out how to market. And I would go to these small amount of conferences, and I was the only one there, so they asked me to talk. And I realized that educating people on stage, educating, was building credibility. So when I spoke to people, I was credible. I started writing articles. I started, doing all the things I keep telling my clients to do. And it just grew out of, I guess my biggest break was people recognizing that I had something to say. And when they did what I suggested, they made money from it. Mm. So, I mean, it wasn't a date that the transition happened, but it was definitely in the early 80s and mid 80s that I took note of that.
Harlan, when we go back to the old, okay, what's that?
I think that was my big break. I mean, I don't, my biggest break was understanding who I was selling. Mm. And then figuring out how to communicate with them.
So take us through too, because I love when we talk old school, anyone listening, or I want them to almost just switch the word from take old school, which I always love, and then just add principle next to it, right? So old school is tried, tested, true, and it transcends, whether it be generations, it could be businesses, it could be circumstance. It's not looking at the circumstance, looking at the principle. When you're looking at a business principle-based, what are the principles that they need to put in play, or the pillars that they need to put in play before, whether it be before or during or in the process of the advertising and marketing? Because I think a lot of people shut themselves off from marketing or advertising because they say in their mind or in their heart, I don't want to prostitute myself. I'm just going to keep doing this thing. But if they were able to, like, I believe that if every single person in Las Vegas knew who my brother was, how his heart was, and how he served his clients, that dude, I mean, he literally would have to fire 95% of the people that came to him because he wouldn't have enough time.
Well, first of all, let me substitute the word old school for experience. What old school means is experience. Okay? That's how I see it. What's old school? He's old school. Is he old fashioned? Is he washed up? Or is he pretty experienced? So we might want to listen to him. During the pandemic, I did about 45, 48 podcasts. And it was kind of interesting. And I finally said to, a couple of these podcasters, I said, so why'd you have me on that? She says, well, we're turning to the gray hairs, not the young kids, because you'd weathered the storm before, and you're going to give us sage advice. And so the most important information I can pass on in the context of this conversation is credibility. Mm. Credibility is everything. If you're a thief and you have credibility, it's because you're a good thief. Just using that as a funny joke, but it's true. Credibility is believability. Credibility is just exactly what it is. Some people have it and some people don't. The reason people don't have credibility is, number one, they don't understand credibility, and they're looking for a shortcut. They're looking for a shiny object, and they're looking to get it quickly. And that's not credible. Mm-hmm. Our parents used to say, good things come to those who wait. Well, nobody wants to wait anymore. We're not a wait society. But you better darn well know exactly who you are and what you have to sell. And that is half the battle. People don't it's kind of funny. They look at agencies, and almost all the agencies that are out there that people go to, you take on the personality of the agency, because that's what the agency is selling. If I go to Whitehart, they're experts at speed and greed, and they do it very, very well, and they do it with as much credibility as they can. But that's not going to fit your brother.
Mm.
So you have to really find the right connection mentally. It's like finding your wife or your partner. The chemistry. You got to be on the same page. You got to have the goods. But you got to take your time. The worst thing you can do in choosing an agency or finding yourself is ask somebody else, do it because the other person did it.
Mm. Harlan, is there a firm out there that doesn't need a marketing agency?
Not that I've ever met. It's not that it's not a marketing agency, whether it's a PR or a person. I'm a consigliere to my clients. I work with about 9 or 10 clients, and none of them really need me. I mean, they're going to do fine without me. But on the other hand, by having somebody that they can talk to, bounce things off of, keep them out of trouble, that's how they're able to double their business. But I want to step on one thing and open the door here to culture. Mm-hmm. The culture of a firm. First of all, it's the most undersold thing in every profession, whether you're a clothing store or it's culture. Culture is so important. It's your work ethic. It's who you hire. It's how people treat people. There's really only 2 people, and certainly Michael Mogul has been the leader in teaching culture. He specializes it. That's why I'm such a fan of him and what he does. Bill Biggs understands culture. He's a consultant. I have tremendous respect for Bill. But if you go beyond that, I don't know who the heck else teaches culture, which is the most important thing you can have in your practice, because it involves hiring, firing, moving the processes, buying software. I got into a whole conversation. One of the founding partners of Lead Docket, which is turned out to be one of the best, supposedly the best, tracking system, for intake and conversion. But there is a specific culture when you buy it. When you pick up your iPhone, the culture of how this phone works is what we're talking about. Why the culture of an Android is different. So culture and how you've got to know exactly who you are before you sell it. I struggled in life, finding a partner in life. And I had a fantastic life, fantastic single life. But when I was 50, I realized it wasn't really working. It looked great on paper and looked, my personal life. I made money. I was invited to every party. It was all great, but I didn't have that relationship with myself. And when I realized that, I got to know who I am. My whole life changed, and a wonderful woman walked into my life. That I changed my culture. I changed my decision making. I changed not who I am, but I got to know who I am. And then I was able to be myself. So your brother, coming back to him, he just needs to figure out how to express himself, how to share what he does with people in an honest way. That's marketing. You can call it whatever you want.
Can you then add, if you add that to, or you take that and then you add TV to it, or you add a billboard, because him and I have talked, and his business is unbelievable. Does he even need that part? Because most people are trying to do the billboard and the TV to get someone to talk about them when they leave, but he's actually gaining that business from his previous business.
Yeah, but he's advertising for it. He's not doing it on a billboard. What he's doing is he's making sure that his clients are happy. He communicates with them. He gets great results. But I will tell you this: if he just leaves them alone, they're going to forget about it, because the public has so much coming at them, and the space is so crowded, unless you're continually kept in front of somebody, they unfortunately in this society forget about you. They're not going to sit back and remember, oh yeah, I remember that guy gave me a great this and great that, because they're bombarded with new messaging every day. So keeping in touch with your past clients through a newsletter, through a birthday card, a simple birthday card. You send them a birthday card. Tell your brother to send birthday cards, because his clients probably never even get birthday cards. It's meaningful. You get something in the mail, old school. I got a birthday card. Oh my God, this guy remembered me. It's something as simple as that. I am huge on birthday cards. And keeping yourself in front of somebody is the most important thing you can do. And that's advertising. And that fits his personality. Now, I don't know your brother. I know the name. But I mean, treating people the way you want to be treated is the greatest advertising in the world. Advertising is not a dirty word. Yeah. We're just using it.
Well, I think a lot of people do see it as a dirty word, right? And this is
you know what people say is a dirty word?
What's that?
Salesman.
Yeah.
Salesman. Tell me who's not selling.
I think it's just the method in which they sell, because I think every person top of mind thinks right when they hear sales, they hear shiny suit, bad Axe body spray, and a lot of, objections, like overcoming objections. That's what a person thinks about most of the time, but they don't. You're absolutely correct in this. And it's mind-blowing because it's so simple.
What people recognize as a salesman, and the first thing that I read was that the first kind of salesman that pops in people's head is a used car salesman.
Yep. Shiny suit.
Because you can describe it. We make fun of that person. We describe it. But you know something? The used car market has changed with the economy.
Yes.
Because people aren't buying new cars as quickly as they're buying used cars because of the economics. And so the used car lot has changed. You don't have the junkers on there. You have first rate, 1-year-old, 2-year-old vehicles. And what kind of buyer is coming into that? So they've had to change. Just take a look at the used car lots in your neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
How they've changed. They've gotten more sophisticated. They really have.
So help me with these: intake, conversion, and accountability.
Biggest hole in everyone's bucket. Absolutely no question. Believe it or not. There isn't a law firm that I have ever met that didn't have holes in their bucket on intake and conversion. What lawyers do is they count what they have, not what they don't have or what they miss. And I've never met a lawyer in my life that walks into his office and says, into their office and say, how many calls did we get today? They walk in, how many cases did we sign? It's always, how many cases did we sign? I like to walk in and say, how many cases didn't we sign? So about 15 or 18 years ago, I started looking at this, and my clients started coming to me because the competition was really fierce, getting fierce. And they said, well, give me more leads. And I said, well, what'd you do with the last ones? I said, well, they weren't any good, so I need more. Think about that. So I started listening to phone calls. I started paying attention to their statistics. And they're all in denial because they just want more. So I'll spend more money to get more leads. But think about it. If you got to understand what you're missing. I own the trademark and the registration for what you don't know, you don't know. So in intake and conversion, you have to take a look at your business, and you know how many cases you signed. I mean, it's obvious. Figure out what you didn't sign. The first thing you're going to do is you'll be in denial. You say, oh, I didn't want that case. Well, then why did you want it? Well, I really didn't want it. So why didn't you convert it? Well, it wasn't really something we were interested in. Well, you didn't convert it because you did a shitty job at converting it. And so anyway, I started recording clients' calls. I started, holding their feet to the fire, which was an impossible task. There's no other profession that I know that you have a ceiling where you can make as much money as you want. I mean, you could be a shitty lawyer and make a lot of money. So they're always looking at the money. The long and short of it is I really looked at it and dissected it, and I knew that we had to have accountability. I mean, the next lawyer you have on your podcast, ask them what kind of tracking do they have? What kind of accountability do they have? Ask them how many clients they didn't sign last week. And if they don't immediately know that answer and have it on their phone in real time, they're losing. So let's fast forward that. So I developed Lead Docket. There was one other product on the market that I really liked, Captora. It actually was a outdated platform. The owner of Captora came to my home and wanted to buy Lead Docket because they knew they had to upgrade. It was Chris O'Brien, who was a dear friend of mine. But if you take a look at what's out there, when I sold Lead Docket to FileVine, we had 180 individual law firms using it. They have well over 1,300 now. So the intake in software is being embraced. Now let's get to the lawyers that are embracing it. I haven't really found one lawyer that has a software, whether it's case management or lead conversion, that has it set up properly. Because the software company sets it up, but they don't customize it to you. And then you don't customize it once you have it. You got a race car, fine tune it and make sure you fit in the seat. And so I have a young lady, I call her, I'm not even going to tell you on who it is because you'll want to call her. She's a miracle worker. She's my secret weapon. She goes into a firm and completely realigns Lead Docket and gets everybody to use it properly and use it well and trains them. And all of a sudden their intake doubles when they start using it. Now, keep in mind, it's already probably doubled from just buying the software. So it's continuing to evolve. And you asked me at the very beginning, what are some of the things? How do I stay in touch? How do I stay grounded? But how do I stay ahead of the curve? I'm paraphrasing your question, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm coming back to that. Well, it's paying attention to the details. Not micromanaging the details, but paying attention to the details. If you pay attention to the details in your practice, as I do, in how to advance your practice, you're way ahead of the game. That's the secret, paying attention to the details. Not micromanaging them, but paying attention to them.
So my son and I made a bad decision by going to Disney World in June because it's the hottest time on the history of the planet in Florida. But when we got there was something that happens every single time, which was we had to have a ticket to be able to get in. If we didn't have the ticket, no matter how cool we were, no matter how nice we were, no matter how handsome my son is, which he's really handsome, Harlan. But there was a divide. Like if you had the ticket, you got in. If you didn't have the ticket, you stayed out. Let's take the pool of attorneys, the whole world. There's the 90% that you had said. I'm going to just quote you real quick. You said 90% of lawyers out there suck. 10%.
Yes, I said.
Yeah, and which is, I love the statement. And then the 10% is over here. There's a divide. What will get the 90% admission to get into the 10%?
Paying attention to the details, paying attention to their client, putting their client's needs first, not their needs first, practicing good law. So when you put your client's needs first, when you take on a case, make sure you invest in it with experts. I wrote this down because I was talking to a client the other day and they embraced this. This is a little thing that I actually wrote down.
Okay.
And it says, if you don't prepare for trial, you are not prepared for settlement. I don't know how I came up with that, but the majority of lawyers, when they settle cases, they get on the phone with the insurance company and they're working over their numbers. That is pathetic. You're negotiating against yourself. The 10% of the lawyers that I'm referring to don't do that. They put the case together and they say, this is what my case is worth, and this is why my case is worth it. Yes. I want to go back to something else we talked about, volume practices.
Yeah.
I do not know of a volume practice in this country, and I know a lot of them, that's growing. So in other words, if if a lawyer in Miami is taking 200 cases a month, he's not taking 201 cases. He's spending more money to keep the 200. The way he's growing their firm is they're moving into Orlando, they're moving into Jacksonville, another market. Well, that's a 7 to 10 year payout. That's growth, but it's very long-term growth. Let's talk short-term growth. What's the best way to make money? Get the best cases. The value of the case is everything. That falls back to the jury, that falls back to paying attention, that falls back to how your brother's making his money. He's getting valued cases. You know, it costs the same amount of money to get a shitty case than a good case. So why aren't you asking for a good case? The way lawyers generally ask for a good case is, I take serious cases. Fuck, everybody takes serious cases. I'm a trucking lawyer. There's a trucking show going on, a convention in Chicago right now. I'm not there because most of the faculty are ambulance chasers wanting more trucking cases. You know, there's only 50 to 60 certified truck lawyers in the country. Most of the cases go to them. But what's happening because firms aren't growing is they're keeping those cases. Mm. They're processing those cases. And who they're shorting?
The client.
But you want to know something? They're shorting themselves because they don't want to pay the finder's fee. Okay? But they're taking so much less money on the negotiations because they're not qualified and they don't sink money into getting that big number. The only way you get that big number is to work for it. And lawyers don't work for it. Majority of lawyers sell their clients short.
Harlan, we get a chance.
This whole conversation is a puzzle, Kelly. We're putting a puzzle.
And it's incredible because in listening, and I invite everyone who gets to spend time with you or get to listen to this podcast or watch it. If you're on Spotify, make sure you comment and do all the stuff. Or on YouTube, because my son's 12 and he thinks I'm cooler if I'm on YouTube. But if you go back in this, you scrub back in it. I wasn't going to say rewind, right? But if you scrub back in it, you laid the blueprint for our whole conversation, and you have been so consistent in what you've been talking about. I mean, from when you first started off, like that you get what you asked for. But I think that so many of us in life are mad at the results for the things that we didn't ask for. We asked for something, we got that thing, but we didn't spend enough time really crafting what we want to ask our client for. And then you said that 90% of lawyers suck. You said that you got to look at any type of advertisement as you're talking to the jury. You got to understand who you're talking to. Old school equals experience. Intake, conversion, and accountability. You broke that down. And then this one was a bomb. And I hope that people go back and lock into this part. If you're not prepared for the trial, you won't be prepared for the settlement.
Yeah, think about that. You know, let's say you're a prize fighter and you're training for a fight. Depending on how you were trained and how you trained for the fight and how you really understood every aspect of it will determine whether you win. You know, if you go in there as a thug and you go in there really strong and you don't have a mental game plan, because it is mental, you know, you're not fully engaged. You're not going to win.
What about to the young lawyer, Harlan, that, you know, they see when we talk about old school, you know, if you do the right thing for the right reason, the right thing will happen, but it doesn't happen in the time that you want it to. And that young lawyer gets out and sees the billboard, sees the guy riding around in the rolls in his town and, you know, is just, you know, not thinking of taking anyone to trial. They're just going to settle the case. They don't even give a darn about who the person, the intake is. They're just taking them in, you know, settle them as quick as possible. To the young kid, like they're thinking like, yeah, I can go old school because it take me a long time and that person is not getting the result. How do you encourage a person from the beginning to do the right thing, even though it'll take a longer amount of time?
You know, it depends. That's very relative, taking a long time. Can you imagine a young kid getting a case, falls into a case, hypothetically, because that's how it all begins. You fall into a case and you settle the case, and you don't know how much money you left on the table. But if I was that young lawyer, I would take that case and I'd work the shit out of it. I'd bring in counsel. I'd find out every angle. And let's say you did that. And let's say you got a lot more money than you expected. What are you going to do with that money? That's your seed money to go further. So there's all ways of looking at it. So that's one way of short circuiting, the long drawn out. Don't misinterpret old school for long drawn out. If you were to, have a conversation with me, you said, what's the quickest way for me to get cases? I'm going to tell you the quickest way to get cases. Good cases, great cases. It may take you a little bit more energy. You may have to stay up a little later. You may have to really research your values. It might not be speed and greed, but it doesn't necessarily take a long time to do it. It's just a different mindset. It's the culture of your brain. It's also how you were brought up. It's how you, processed, how you did things, how you do things. Going back to the sales comment, you've heard the 80-20 rule. 80% of salesmen make 20% of the money, and 20% makes 80% of the money. Well, what does that 20% do? It's the same correlation as my 90-10 rule here, with lawyers that suck. Take that case, work the hell out of it, and you'll get another one. What's going to be painful is you having to put your hand in your pocket for experts. What's going to be painful is the late nights that you're going to have to find and dig deep and bring in advice. That's going to be the painful part, not the length. I was in the barber chair 6 months ago. Mm-hmm. And this is a very popular barber. He cuts all the people's right hairs. I share my time between Scottsdale and South Dakota, and my barber cuts two lawyers' hair. They're both speed and greed. They're competing against each other. I won't say the name. And so you have one up and coming lawyer. They're both taking in about 500 cases a month, which is astronomical. Okay, so the one lawyer, my client, was talking to one of the lawyers that had this big trucking case. They're true stories, to help me God. And he's a certified truck lawyer. He was getting his cases, and this lawyer decided to keep the case, trucking case. And he was talking to Boris, the barber, and Boris, tells me everything because we tell our barber everything as psychiatrists. And he said the lawyer decided to take $1.5 million on the case because he needed it for his cash flow. Case was worth $3 to $5 million. It would have taken 2 years to get it. Who did the right thing? Think about it. But if that lawyer that sold the client short did it on one case, he's doing it on all of his cases. Because the money is addicting. Think about that. This happens every single day of the week. It's unbelievable. The other law firm, I don't believe, has the value, has the right lawyers to take the case, and they're holding all their cases now as well. I'm not saying that's good or bad.
Yeah.
I do not believe it's good for the client. Client doesn't know. They react to both of their advertising. We're going to get you all the money that you deserve. Every single cent of it. Quickly, today.
It's unreal how consistent it is, Harlan. And it's like,
well, in advertising, with Kelly, you're in advertising. The third rule, on my first rule, second, is be consistent. How many times lawyers get on television or they have a message and then 60 days later it's gone? Well, it didn't work. Well, it was probably ill-conceived in the first place. And number two, you didn't give it long enough because everything works. It's just a question of how it works. Keep in mind, lawyers chase shiny objects and they follow the other guy. Almost all of them follow the other guy. That's why they all look the same. why every ad looks the same. They're all saying the same thing. I'll get you this. I'll do this. I'll do this. I'll do this. I'll do this. Me, me, me. It's not about you, Mr. Lawyer. It's about your client. Read the oath of office that you took when you were a lawyer. I does not exist in that.
Harlan, we're at NiftyCon because you and I are there at NiftyCon together. You know what? We get to spend some time together in person, right?
I look forward to it.
Oh, I cannot wait. I mean, this is it. Okay, so you and I are talking, and we're hanging out because we're guys now, right? We're friends now.
Friends for life.
Okay, person. Like as we're walking by, because this is going to happen, everyone's going to be clamoring for Harlan. I'm going to be like probably having to act as security for you because everyone's going to be clamoring. Like, let me get some time with Harlan. So
fantasizing.
as that's happening, and we're walking towards the bar. Now you're going to have that martini that you had in your profile shot. That's the first time anyone's had a drink in their profile shot on the history of the podcast. In almost 500 episodes, you're the first. That's why I called you the Godfather. But we're going to be going towards the bar. You're going to be getting your martini. You're going to be on your way to get that. I'm going to be getting on the way to get some water. And someone's going to stop you and say, Harlan, I got a question. But we have to be to this other place. As we're walking by, they say, how could, you help me? You had 20 seconds to just say, bang, 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 to that person, to that attorney. What would you say?
Well, first of all, that's happened a million times to me. And I do one of two things. If somebody's going to ask me that much of a question, I'm going to stop. I'm going to shake their hand. I'm going to introduce myself, and I'm going to ask for their phone number. And I'm going to follow up on the question. Always. Whether it's a bad question, poor question, because if I don't, they're going to remember me saying no, number one. Because I'm marketing. That's why I'm at your conference, to provide help to other lawyers. But also, quite frankly, it helps my personality. It keeps me in front of people. Or I will say, come walk with me. And let's walk and talk because I'm heading over to the bar right now. One of those two things would happen.
Would you add that, I'm going to buy Kelly the water while I get the martini?
Well, first of all, I've cut back on my martinis about 80% in the last couple of years. Not for any particular reason other than I'm getting older and I'm not feeling that good in the morning. But I do like a good martini. Great Kettle One, shaken vigorously with 3 plain olives. Clean. I think you got to treat people the way you want to be treated. I mean, think about that. I mean, there's no better golden rule. I mean, it's in the Bible. It works. It makes sense. I mean, this morning I blew it with you. It didn't get to my calendar. I mean, let's talk the truth here. The call didn't get to the appointment didn't get to my calendar. And I missed our meeting. That was really embarrassing. Believe me. So what did we do? You said, can we do it now? What immediately popped into my mind is, this is about you. I screwed up. I'm going to go in a different direction immediately, and I'm going to accommodate this gentleman because he's trying to help me and help the audience. I fucked up. I missed the call. And we've been on the phone for an hour and a half now. I just stopped everything I was doing and said, this is the most important thing I have to do. And I don't know whether it was your personality but I took responsibility and I treated you the way I would want to be treated. I mean, that's a real story. That's true.
Absolutely. And it's amazing how you dealt with it. And I want to tell, like, for the people listening or watching, I mean, it's exact, because there was a fork at that point. There was a fork in the road, as far as like you could have, and justifiably, understandably, you're a busy guy, you're in demand, you're the Godfather. So you but you took the time. And I watched this. This is the cool thing with the consistency with you. And I watched your whole episode today. I actually watched that happen in 3 minutes before we ever got on the call.
You know, I know hugely successful lawyers. People think lawyers are hugely successful because they make a lot of money. You take a Mark Garagos, who I have tremendous respect for. I've seen people stop him in the middle of him, rushing to a meeting, and how he dealt with it. I represented the Cochran firm, Johnny Cochran, for 35 years. Mr. Cochran, when you'd have a conversation and pick it up 6 months later, he picked it up just where the conversation ended. Mark O'Mara, a huge individual in my life, tremendous mentor. You treat people the way you want to be treated. Now, these are people at the top of their game. Jose Baez down in Miami. I mean, these are friends. These are people that I learn from. But you look at the most successful people. They're not because they're idiots. They're not because they're snobs. If you stop Tony Robbins in a hotel where he's walking in to check in, he'll spend a moment with you for a number of reasons. Number one, that's how he wants to be treated. Number two, he understands the meaning of that because he's really marketing. And you don't have to use marketing as that dirty word. I'm selling everybody. I got to sell everybody. You're marketing, you're exposing yourself. This is how you carry yourself. This is your brand. This is your character.
Well, Harlan, I cannot wait to spend some time with you at NiftyCon there in Salt Lake. I'm trying to get my brother to come. I want him to come, not just because now he has even more of a reason to come. I was saying I just want him to come because, well, number one, his baby brother is speaking there, but number two, he gets to meet Harlan. But number three, be in the space. It's going to be amazing. I can't wait to have your Kettle One with 3 olives clean, waiting for you, my man.
It's interesting. I did not really know Nifty. I knew the name and I saw your advertising. And I was always attracted to your advertising because it's so clever. It's a millennial company that hired an old guy.
You know what's funny though, Harlan, is I don't own the company. They hired me in, so I'm coming in as a keynote for there. But I mean, it's amazing. Like I got connected with them. Just this is a great, and I'll tell you the story quick. I spoke at a real estate convention, and I speak on the vibe, right? And it's exactly what we were talking about today, right? So it's not the energy that you bring in; it's the way that people feel when you leave. And so the coin phrase, kind of phrase with it is what I found was that your culture doesn't really matter. Your systems or your leadership is irrelevant, and your systems will never work if the vibe is off, if people don't feel good about it, right? And so you could take any cultural style, just like you said, like the culture is important, but it's not as important as far as like you have to do this particular culture and you'll succeed. You can do any of them. There's so many different variations, but people have to feel good about them. So I got a chance to speak at this real estate convention, and someone in the audience was a friend of the person who ran NiftyCon. And so she got on the phone with him, and they called me to come, and it's right in line with what it is that you're talking about. It wasn't a billboard that came from, it was the fact of the way that the people felt in the audience.
It's interesting. Let's just talk another second about NiftyCom. What I did my research, I did my homework, I did a little bit of homework, and I said, I'll join you guys. And what I did find is that everybody that I dealt with and everybody that I researched, they're young, but they have an old soul. So back to that old thing, old guy, old, school, or old whatever. They have a very grounded, old school mentality. I use the word. It's what's the word I'm trying? It's old school, but it's Kelly, I just used it. My mind is wearing out here. Let's see. It's old soul.
Oh yeah,
The
Old Soul.
old
Yep.
soul. And that's how I interpreted you and everybody at Nifty. I think that's pretty credible.
Well, I think it's amazing. I'm so excited, like, and honored to be able to spend time with you. I cannot wait. It's to be able to meet you in person, shake your hand, and honestly, like, you know, to to honor you in the fact of it's very seldom that you get a chance to be able to see somebody who just talks about what they do, right? Because there's a lot of people who preach. They preach like, oh, I'm doing this. You need to do this. But there's a different side. Maybe it's the 10%, like what you're talking about, that isn't out there trying to tell you what to do. They're just showing you what they've been able to do, and it's your choice to be able to put it in play or not. And it would be silly on this earth to listen to you and not to apply it because everyone's life that listened to you in that law profession would be better.
Well, thank you for that. I think you're overselling me, but my wife wakes me up every single day, true story, and says to me, Harlan, I want you to be interested, not interesting, every freaking day. And I used to say, all right, I heard it. But she's absolutely right. And my father, who rest his soul, passed a number of years ago, one of the most important things he said to me, and he says this to me every day, is nobody gives a shit how much money you have when you die. You're going to be judged by how you treated people. And so I got these powerful people, mentoring me, constantly and trying to keep me straight, keep me square. And I pass that on, in our closing moments. I really hope your audience takes those words, digests them, and really think about that.
Well, Harlan, it has been my honor and pleasure. I started the podcast because of my two kids. My son is 12, and he's a little football player. And then my daughter is 15 years old. She's in drama, acting, things like that. I never wanted them to worship idols. I just wanted them to be inspired by icons. So what advice would you have for Maddox and McKenna? And if you could use both their names, it would be awesome.
Maddox, you're a growing boy with a great influence that will influence the world. Make the best of it. Listen more 60% of the time and talk 40% of the time. Okay, your daughter's name is?
McKenna.
McKenna. Oh, beautiful names. McKenna, stay true to your soul. Listen to what your parents have to say. Be your own person. Tell the truth. Work hard.
I haven't done this one before, but what would you say to my brother? My brother's name is Rob Cardenas. He's been, I can't remember the exact amount of years that he was in practice, in over 20. He's an unbelievable human being. What would you say to him?
Continue to do what you're doing and spread the word by just doing what you're doing. And there's a big difference. Most people talk the talk. Very few people walk the talk. And think about how you have influenced your clients, how you have helped them in their worst days of their lives, and continue to do it. I mean, obviously what you're doing is full of passion. And that's what's driving him, not, it's passion, because a man doesn't wake up in the morning and say, I think I'm going to put my clients first without passion. They just don't, I've heard so many times, me, I got it. My numbers are off. I didn't sign this one case. I did, my numbers, and I'm so over it. I'm so over it. The narcissism. Just, your brother should absolutely continue. I know the Vegas market, it is a difficult market. Mm-hmm. It's a cesspool. Yeah. One of my dearest friends, Ed Bernstein, was the original advertiser there. He's a class act. And then you take a look at all the ambulance chases that are on television. They don't give a shit about their clients. Not one television commercial, not one ad ever says is about their clients. It's always about them. standing in front of his Rolls Royce and his Lamborghini, with the other one, I'm the biggest, the best. Your brother is driven by passion and humility.
Well, I appreciate you, Harlan. It's my honor and pleasure. I'd love to have you on the podcast in the future too.
Oh, sure.
I think it
I
would
love
be
this.
incredible. But the only way that I will, Harlan, is if you change in your bio, it's going to Godfather. And you could even put like said by Kelly Cardenas, but I'm saying like you're the Godfather. You ain't the grandfather, bro.
Well, let me understand this. If I don't do that, you're not going to interview me again. We probably are not going to have another interview then.
Oh, come on. I'm going to interview you anyway. I want to have you on the show as often as possible. I mean, your wisdom is unbelievable. I mean, it is for me today. And I just want to thank you. This is a selfish thing. I mean, I know other people are going to hear this, but
Kelly, the purpose of what we're doing today is to help other people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not looking to bring on new clients. I'm not chasing the buck. I've retired 3 times. It hasn't worked. But the point of this whole conversation is if we can influence somebody out there, and show them a different path, or show them a path, of peace and prosperity, that's what we're doing. This podcast isn't much different than when I went on stage in 1984, and talked about what you should or shouldn't do. Okay? What we're doing is we're influencing people in a positive way, without any strings attached.
Well, I appreciate it. And I would love to have you on the podcast in the future. You have been more than generous with your time today, and unreal. And I'm going to force you to be my friend for the rest of your life, Harlan. So
You're not to force me. I already like you. I'd love to do a podcast with you interviewing someone else.
That would be awesome.
Interview some other, high profile person, or low, it doesn't matter at that profile. I'm not, I love that. I'm not a worshiper of idols.
Well, let's do it. I'm in. I would love to. That would be an honor. It would be so much fun. Do you want sports? Do you want entertainment? Do you want law? What would be the ultimate?
The ultimate is to have a great podcast that brings value to the public.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to make sure and do that. Can you stay on for 1 second? 1 second. We're going to run a commercial to send us go, but stay on for a second. Is that cool?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Harlan, you're officially off the hot seat.
Nothing more on my mind. I got to shine, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised. Over and over and over again. Make no mistake, we continue to win. Defeat never known, cause I will not lose. They wanna mimic my moves, but can't walk in my shoes.